Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi Zhi. Coming up in this edition, Hamas says a truce agreement with Israel is closer than ever, with several points to be finalized. Yemen's Houthi group claims to have targeted a U.S. aircraft carrier after U.S. airstrikes on the country's capital. And the German police say the suspect involved in a Christmas market attack in Magdeburg faces multiple charges of murder. We begin in the Middle East. Hamas and two other Palestinian factions say a truce agreement with Israel is closer than ever. Egypt, Qatar and the United States mediated indirect talks in Doha last week. A Palestinian official says the ceasefire talks are 90% complete, but negotiators need to finalize several points. Abd al-Marouki sent this report from Cairo.
One of the latest meetings was held here in Cairo between representatives of Hamas, the Islamic Jihad and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, all three organizations or all three groups that represent quite a significant representation of the Palestinian resistance in Gaza. Now, one of the main points of differences, or two main points of differences, is precisely the number of Palestinian prisoners will be released from Israel, their names, and where will they go after being released? Will they go back to the Palestinian territories or away from the country? Also, Israel's right to veto some of the names. How many will Israel get? This is also part of the finalizing points that have not been clear yet, that an agreement has been reached about which. On the other hand, Israel's presence in Gaza, which territories will military presence will be maintained, will be security checkpoints, if so, where exactly, and that will indirectly affect the movement specifically for Hamas from the north to the south. There seems to be quite an agreement that Israel will take a step away from the Rafah crossing, the main passage between Egypt and Gaza. So these are basically where the deal has not been clear to have reached an agreement yet. It seems that now it is closer than ever, according to Egyptian, Qatari sources and as well as people from Hamas.
That was Abd al-Marouki in Cairo. Israeli opposition leaders are accusing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of sabotaging the ceasefire talks. Jonathan Regev reports from Tel Aviv.
What the opposition is saying, Paul, is that basically this is the Netanyahu policy as we've seen it in previous cases. Every time that it seems that a hostage deal is about to come, Benjamin Netanyahu finds way, according to the opposition, to sabotage it. This is due to the fact that Netanyahu is well aware that there are factors within his coalition, mostly the far-right leaders, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, that oppose such a deal. And Netanyahu knows very well that without the two of them and their parties, there's no coalition for him. And according to the opposition, every time that Netanyahu would have to decide between the good of the hostages or the good of his coalition, he will always go with his coalition. According to Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz, this time is no different. Benny Gantz, for example, saying that as reports were coming of a possible progress in the negotiations for an agreement, Benjamin Netanyahu went and gave interviews to foreign media, to the Wall Street Journal, for example, and put prices that he knew that the other side would not accept, thus sabotaging the deal. Yair Lapid, the head of the opposition, saying that once again Netanyahu is giving everybody perhaps the hope, the illusion that a deal is about to come, but then as he realizes once again that those right-wing elements within his coalition would not support the deal, he puts on prices that Hamas, he is well aware that Hamas will not pay. Netanyahu in these cases putting the blame on everybody else, on Hamas, on the opposition, on the protests, but it's actually you, Netanyahu, according to Yair Lapid, that is the one behind the failure of the negotiations. This is basically what the opposition has been saying. Gantz, Lapid, Avigdor Lieberman as well, all of the leaders of the big parties in the opposition. This is also what the families have been saying. They've been saying it throughout the week and also last night in the Saturday night protests. What will happen? Are we heading for a deal, or are we heading for another heartbreak as we've seen in previous cases? No one really knows. But according to the opposition, Netanyahu is doing exactly what he did in previous cases in May and in July, and now is doing the same once again in December.
That was Jonathan Regev reporting from Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Israel has intensified attacks over the Gaza Strip. A strike on the shelter in an Israeli-designated humanitarian zone in southern Gaza killed 5 people. The Israeli army also ordered staff to evacuate Kamal Adwan Hospital in the north, one of the last remaining health facilities. The hospital is without power after an airstrike. Its director says it is impossible to transfer patients without outside help. From Gaza, here's Rami Almagari.
Let's start with the central Gaza Strip in Al Bureij refugee camp, where 5 people have been reportedly killed during an Israeli airstrike on the Al Bureij refugee camp, which saw armed clashes between Palestinian militants and the Israeli forces. Also, in the Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza Strip, there has been intense Israeli fire on the Mukhayam al-Jadid, or the new camp in Nusayrat refugee camp to the west of Nusayrat refugee camp, and people have been reportedly injured during Israeli army actions and army fire on the Mukhayam al-Jadid refugee camp in Nusayrat. In the same Mukhayam al-Jadid, there was an Israeli strike in which 5 people have been killed, also because of the intensity of the Israeli actions over there. When we go up to the north, in the northern Gaza Strip, Jabal refugee camp, there was an intensive fire on the Kamal Adwan hospital, and it seems that the Israeli army is getting impatient towards the existence of that hospital, asking or ordering the hospital staff to evacuate immediately under intense Israeli fire, and a toddler was killed in the hospital because of the Israeli fire on the Kamal Adwan hospital.
That was Rami Almagari reporting. Elsewhere in the Middle East, the United States has carried out airstrikes on Yemen's capital, targeting Houthi military facilities. The Houthis have claimed that they shot down a U.S. fighter jet and targeted the USS Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier. The U.S. military said the FA-18 was shot down in an apparent friendly fire incident, and both pilots ejected safely. The Houthi group and Israel also hit each other last week. Protesters have taken to the streets in Yemen to condemn Israel's attacks. Ahab Al-Fandi has more from Sana'a.
Thousands of Yemenis gathered in a square in the capital, Sana'a, raising slogans and chanting calls to intensify and expand military operations at sea and deep into Tel Aviv in protest against Israel, which carried out a series of airstrikes against sports and energy infrastructure in Sana'a and Hodeidah. Protesters condemned these airstrikes, saying their targets are civilians and reflect Israel's approach of attacking daily life. They also say Israel has failed to stop Yemen's support for Gaza.
The airstrikes and attacks on the Yemeni Republic and its resources can in no way deter the Yemeni people from standing with, supporting and providing religious, Arab and Islamic solidarity to the Palestinian people.
We came out today to condemn the aggressive strikes on the Yemeni people, as well as the Israeli aggression against Syria, Palestine, and all the resistance fighters in Arab and Islamic countries.
Ansar Allah, also known as Yemen's Houthi movement, whom Israel claims to target to change their stance on Gaza, have not shifted their position. They describe the Israeli attacks on power stations in southern and northern Sana'a and the Salif district in Hodeidah, which killed at least 9 people, as acts of terrorism. They affirm their continued support for Gaza.
Surprises are being prepared to target the depths of the Israeli enemy's territory. We will not stay silent about any attacks and will respond to strikes with even bigger strikes. The message was delivered clearly. While Sana'a was being bombed, we simultaneously targeted the Ministry of Defense in Tel Aviv.
On a Friday, The military spokesperson for Ansarullah announced a joint military operation by Yemen and Iraq targeting southern Israel with several drones, which he said successfully hit their targets.
The continued crimes committed against our brothers in Gaza will only lead to more strikes through missile power and drone air force.
On the International Day of Human Solidarity, Yemenis have gathered in a Sab'in square and more than 400 other locations. Their message to the world is that they will not back down from supporting the Palestinian people, even if that means open warfare with Israel. At the same time, they are calling for a national solidarity campaign to stop Israel's war in Gaza.
That is Afandi in Yemen's capital. Turning to Europe, German police say the suspect involved in the Christmas market attack in Magdeburg last week faces multiple charges of murder. The incident killed 5 people and injured scores of others. The government has vowed to investigate any potential security lapses before the attack. The suspect has made death threats online and had been in trouble with the law. Natalie Carney reports.
They continue to come. Mourners, young and old, laying flowers, lighting candles, paying their respects for the 5 that lost their lives and the more than 200 that were injured in Friday night's attack.
Unfortunately, this has already happened several times in Germany and elsewhere, and I actually ask myself more quickly, in consequence, what goes on in such brains.
Eric is here to pay respect for the victims, including a colleague of his mother who was hit and is now in hospital. A single white rose in his hand.
We are here to show sympathy for how it affects us, to set an example.
On a visit to the site of the attack on Saturday, Chancellor Olaf Scholz said the country should stand together and not allow those who wish to sow hate to do so.
It is important to me that when such a terrible, horrific event takes place, such a terrible attack that injures and kills so many people, that we stay together as a country, that we stick together and that we unite. That it is not hatred that determines our togetherness, but the fact that we are a community that wants to win a common future.
On Saturday evening, around 100 far-right protesters silently marched through the streets of Magdeburg, calling for re-immigration, a euphemism for mass deportation. The suspect, a doctor from Saudi Arabia who had been living in Germany since 2006, was arrested at the scene. His online presence pointed towards a hatred for Islam and support for right-wing politics. While the motive for the attack remains unclear, Magdeburg's public prosecutor has said the suspect mentioned a dissatisfaction with the treatment of Saudi Arabian refugees here in Germany. Meanwhile, the Federal Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser, while visiting this site on Saturday, said that he was obviously Islamophobic. Reports show that authorities had been made aware of the suspect's increasingly anti-German discourse, but it was not considered a concrete threat. As the investigation into the attack continues, residents of Magdeburg are doing what they can to salvage what's left of the Christmas spirit.
That was Natalie Carney on the Christmas market attack in Germany. Now, recapping the headlines before we go, Hamas says a truce agreement with Israel is closer than ever, with several points to be finalized. Yemen's Houthi group claims to have targeted a U.S. aircraft carrier after U.S. airstrikes on the country's capital. And police in Germany say the suspect involved in the Christmas market attack in Magdeburg faces multiple charges of murder. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.